This is awesome. You know, when I walked into this place today, I was so excited because this is my first speech of the year. So I'm starting off my speaking career this year with you guys. And I love middle school and high school students and just kids in general. It's always been my passion. But one of the things that I have to correct really quick is that I was in Boston in 2013, but I was not running in that marathon. As a matter of fact, I was on the sidelines eating chocolate-covered pretzels, wondering why anyone would ever run 26.2 miles for fun, okay? Exactly, right? I'm saying. But it was my first time ever in Boston. It was my 26th birthday weekend, and I had gone up there to watch a friend that had qualified to run in the marathon. And I remember that weekend and the days before that getting prepared like it was yesterday. One of the things that sticks out in my mind the most is that I wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. I had been so swamped at work. I was working at a corporate housing firm. I had all of these accounts piling up. My boss is, he's screaming down my throat about it, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there's no way that I'm going to be able to go on this trip. And so I'm there the night before I leave for Boston until 11 o'clock at night at work. And I'm thinking, no matter what, I'm going to go. This is going to be so much fun. I need this time off. I was going to take my son, who was 5 at the time, to go up to Boston with me. So I had planned this whole trip, and I was like, this is going to be awesome. So we get on that plane that morning, and we're all excited, and we get to Boston, and Boston is a really cool city, and marathon weekend is a big deal. So they've got like all of these things to do. You're touring the city, and they've got magic shows happening and all of this food. And did I mention all of this food, this delicious food everywhere? And then we caught a Red Sox game, and we toured more of the city, and we ate more food. And on that Monday, we were all packed up and ready to go back home after the marathon concluded. At that time, I was living in Texas, and so my son and I were going to fly back down to Texas, and we were going to go on our normal lives. But I remember specifically on that marathon Monday getting there and thinking I had never seen so many people in my entire life. 500,000 people are there watching the runners who had qualified to run. It was amazing. We got to the 17-mile marker because we were tracking our runner with an app on our phones. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, like these people have trained incredibly hard to be able to run this marathon. And there is no way I am ever going to run anywhere besides if someone is chasing me. And so here we are, and I have my son with me. And we're now we can see our runner because we're tracking her. So then we get to the mile marker and we can see her. So now we have signs. We're in a group of 9 people, and we're holding up our signs and so excited. And it's this contagious atmosphere where everybody's cheering, everybody's happy to see their runners crossing. And then you have my 5-year-old son. And there was one specific time in that day where it was really funny because Noah was looking, and this runner in front of him proceeds to lose his breakfast right in front of Noah. But then the craziest thing happens because the runner continued to run. And so Noah and I had this whole like mother-son moment, like, I don't get it either, buddy. I have no idea what they're doing, right? But it was a great day, and that's why I emphasize the before part, because so often in our lives, we're going along great, everything is good, we're having a good time, and then all of a sudden something happens to completely throw us off course. Now, one of the people in our group of about 9, said that we needed to make our way closer to the finish line that day to actually see our runner cross. And so he said, yeah, okay, that's a good idea. And so we start making our way to the finish line. But what people don't tell you is that when you have all of these people in a marathon and you're going to watch your one runner participate, you actually end up running that marathon yourself, trying to keep up with the runner that you're watching. So not only am I trying to run along, trying to keep up, but I'm also trying to keep up with my 5-year-old son, who then I'm thinking, why in the world did I bring my 5-year-old to a marathon of 500,000 people in the first place? Not the smartest idea I've ever had in my life. But we get to the finish line, and we're right in the middle of the action. We had the best spot right in front, and I had this epiphany because Noah was getting really bored. By that time, he's tugging on my clothes. Mom, I'm so bored. Can we go home? Do you have any toys that I can play with? Toys? No, Noah, I don't have anything you can play with. And I said, you know what, buddy? Why don't you sit down on my feet with your back against my shins, and so you can watch the runners, but then you will be safe too. And now I'm thinking in my head, okay, if Noah's sitting here, then I can watch our runner cross the finish line, and he's not going to get lost in the crowd. That decision is what I found out ultimately saved Noah's life. Because when a bomb in a backpack went off 3 feet behind us, I took everything in the back of the legs and acted as a human shield for my own son. Now, before I get started in the rest of my journey, and it's been a tough one over the last 6 years, what I want you to know is while the majority of people will never get blown up by a bomb in a marathon, every single person has life blow up in their face. And it's when you're like me that day, when I was on the sidelines, eating chocolate-covered pretzels, minding my own business, and then all of a sudden, life literally blows up before me. Life is hard. It is really, really hard. And what people don't realize a lot of times is that it's supposed to be, right? Because when we open our Bible, we see all of the different things that people go through, all of the different people that were persecuted just for having a relationship with Jesus. But what I learned and what I know throughout my life and what I knew that day was the reason that if we were 3 feet away from the first bomb that went off at the marathon, and I'm still here to tell you about it, and my son is still here to tell you about it, then no matter what, God's got a bigger plan for me and my son, and for every single person that's sitting in here going through your own bomb or going through your own marathon. God never gives up on us. And so that day, angels were all around us protecting us. And I remember every single part of that horrific incident. I remember waking up where I could barely move my head. I couldn't move my body at all. I looked down and I was in a pool of my own blood. There were nails and ball bearings and BBs and pieces of metal, and everything that these brothers could pack into these pressure cooker bombs went off everywhere. It was a war scene. There were other people's body parts not even attached to them anymore, laying on the ground. And more importantly, that's what my 5-year-old son had to experience that day. That's what he had to see. He had to see the most evil thing imaginable on earth. But I remember thinking then what I think now. You know, the reason that we're here, the reason that we survived such a horrific incident is that God wasn't finished with us yet. Now, what's interesting about this is, horrific as that day was, 6 months before Boston, I got held up in a Walmart parking lot and robbed at gunpoint. I thought that was going to be the biggest highlight of my life. Not even close. But see, when I look back at my entire life, it starts from when I was a little girl. My dad was a preacher. He was an evangelist. He traveled all over the country preaching. But then he would come home and abuse me and my mom. And so this person that we saw at church was not the person that his family saw behind closed doors. And so from a very young age, I had a very skewed vision of what Christianity and faith really was. But no matter what I went through, no matter the hardships and the price that I had to pay for just being his daughter every day, I saw my mom, and I saw her faith in God, and I saw God bring us through so much in our lives. And so I knew in my heart that there was something more, that there was something bigger, that there was a purpose far beyond what I even knew about. And I look back at my life, and it continues on through my teenage years when I was so sick in high school that I had to be pushed in a wheelchair because I started passing out just randomly one day. And I would pass out for 2 and 3 days at a time and have to spend my years in a hospital bed instead of being able to hang out with my friends. And that was hard. That was a really hard thing to go through when I was 15 years old and just was trying to fit in and do the best I could and have as much fun as I could, to have to deal with this illness that I didn't even know what was happening to me. And then a few years before, after I got out of high school, and a few years before Boston happened, I was in a car accident with a deer, and I'm driving down the road, and the deer comes through my windshield, and I get knocked out by the door, unconscious, and I wake up, and a dead deer is staring at me in the face with his antler lodged into my wrist. I still have the scar today to prove it. Now, you talk about a crazy life. That is crazy. And guess what? I can tell you 25 other things that have happened to me to get me up to this point that probably should have never happened. But the reason that I'm telling you these things and the reason that I go into that before I go into my marathon story is because life is hard. We are not guaranteed an easy life, and we're certainly not guaranteed an easy life when we follow Jesus. But one of the things that really resonates with me is that when we follow Jesus, we don't always know where we're going, but we know who we're going with. All throughout my life, I've known that he's right there with me, and he's brought me through some of the most horrible, horrific things, but it's all given me this purpose bigger than I could even imagine now. But Boston specifically was one of the hardest parts of my life. It's been 6 years. April 15th will be the 6-year anniversary of the marathon bombing, and I remember them coming into my hospital room and me being completely unrecognizable to my own mom. I was in a medically induced coma for a week, and by the time I was waking up, I realized that my son had gone to a completely different hospital than me. They had taken him because they didn't know that we were even related at the time. But the miracle in all that was by the time I was waking up in my own hospital, he was coming to see me. Noah had a cut to his bone on his right leg that they were able to stitch up with just a few stitches. He had a piece of metal graze the back of his head where he had a small little bald spot and still does today. But other than those two things, Noah was perfectly fine. Standing here before you today, you can obviously see there's things that I'm missing, right? But I've also had 67 surgeries to repair damage from that one bomb. And I'm getting ready to have my 68th surgery because it's an ongoing process. That day I had so many pieces of metal that went into my body that I still have metal coming out of my body today. I still have issues with my leg as is. But that day when I woke up, I wrote to my mom because there were tubes still down my throat. And I wrote on a piece of paper and I said, God is not finished with me yet. There were angels all around us. I saw those angels. And in the midst of all of that evil that day, that is what sticks out the most. Life is hard. And I decided that day that no matter how hard my life may become, I was going to choose to count my blessings and not my problems. I was going to look at it as I'm alive, and there is a reason for that. There's so many different things throughout every single day that tries to steal our joy. It's so hard living in the world that we are, where we have so many expectations, so many things that we are supposed to do, to be cool, told to be accepted, to fit in, to live our lives in a certain way. It's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. And then you still feel empty, like something is missing in your life. And so those days when I had no idea what was happening, I felt so empty, but yet so fulfilled because I knew that God had a plan in all of it. And so from the beginning, I decided that I was going to count my blessings, that I was going to be excited that I was alive, and I was going to figure out what I was supposed to do next. So the doctor came in, and the first thing they said to me is, Rebekah, I've got some good news, and I've got some bad news. The good news is you're alive. Hooray! And the bad news is you may not get to keep your right leg. You most definitely won't get to keep your left leg, and you're probably going to lose your left hand. When the bomb happened, when it hit me, I had all of my skin on my left hand peeled back to my wrist and my bones sticking out. So I almost lost that. My right leg was completely shredded. It looked like a shark ate me for lunch and I was its leftovers. My left leg and foot had 80% of the bone and muscle and tissue completely gone. And so what they were trying to save, I looked like I was almost dying. I mean, they were piecing me back together every single day, surgery after surgery after surgery, and digging pieces of metal, hundreds of thousands of pieces of metal out of my body. That was my reality on that week, and that was my reality for the next couple of years. The doctors wanted to do something called limb salvage, and limb salvage is a really complicated process, but basically it just means we want to try to save your leg until you can no longer save it anymore. And so for a year and a half, doctors tried desperately to save my leg. They were like, we don't want you to lose it. It's going to be so hard, so we're going to keep doing these surgeries. And they did. And I had things like an external fixator that you can see in this picture. And my foot was like this at one point, okay? And this thing slowly moved it up to a right angle so that I could possibly walk on it, maybe in the coming months. So every day, my mom and I had to turn these dials that would pull my foot up with these rods sticking through my bones that I had left. You talk about painful, that was miserable. I had two of them for months. And so for a year and a half, this was my life. Surgery after surgery, 37 different pain medications. I could not walk. I was in the bed or in a wheelchair constantly. And I finally decided one day, I said, look, my leg has not been my leg since that day. And if it will help to just cut it off, let it go. I was so ready to start living my life again. I was so stuck. And I feel like in life, we have these decisions that we are supposed to be making, but it's so hard to make them sometimes because you're so afraid that if you let go of what's holding you back, then you don't realize what you're going to have moving forward. And oftentimes, that's a really scary thing. You don't know what's ahead of you, and so you keep holding on to the comfortable and the familiar. But I'm here to tell you that when we stop holding on to the comfortable and the familiar, and we start living our lives in different, more positive, exciting ways, then beautiful things happen. And so for me, one of the biggest decisions of my life came when I had to literally decide to cut my leg off. And I remember having this conversation with my mom, and she said, Rebekah, I don't want you to do this. I know that you have to, but what about if we talk about, when you get your prosthetic, if you get a cosmetic leg? And what she meant by that is there's some amazing, and I'm sure you guys have seen them, cosmetic legs today, they look like actual legs. My friend, as a matter of fact, has one. She has a prosthetic as well. You would never know that she had a fake leg. It looks real, down to the toes. It's incredible. And so my mom's like, please, begging me, just get a cosmetic leg. And I took her hand and I said, Mom, if I were to get a cosmetic leg at this point in time, then that meant that I was ashamed of what had happened to me. I was ashamed and trying to cover something up. This does not define who I am. What defines who I am is what I am going forward and who I turn out to be as a result of all the horrible things that I've gone through. And so I squeezed my mom's hand tight and I said, Mom, I'm going to get the baddest robot leg you have ever seen, okay? I'm not getting a cosmetic leg. I'm going to get the fakest fake leg ever, and I'm going to totally rock it. And you better believe I'm going to still paint my toes every 2 weeks because, hello, priorities, right? And I'm going to wear dresses, and I'm going to wear shorts, and I am going to show myself and everyone else around me that this is not going to take anything away from me, that I am going to come back stronger and more courageous and more powerful than I ever have been. And my mom looked and she was terrified, right? She didn't think that I could ever do that because she said, I just don't want you to not feel like a lady. I don't want you to be self-conscious. And I know that this is going to be a completely different life. And she was right. It is a completely different life. On November 10th of 2015, I decided to cut off what was holding me back. But I said, it's like a bad boyfriend, right? I needed to get it out of my life for good. So I wrote on my leg, it's not you, it's me. I wrote it a breakup letter saying it was time to go. And we actually had a going away party for my leg because, I just needed to send it out the door in proper fashion. And when I had my amputation on November 10th of 2015, I woke up and I had never felt better about anything in my life up until that point. I had made a decision to cut it out, to get rid of that bad boyfriend because Lord knows I've had enough of those things. And I decided that I was going to live my life in a way that I had never lived before. I think about it, and I took my life for granted on so many different occasions. And I didn't even realize it then. For 26 years, I expected to get out of the bed and put 2 feet on the ground and go about my day. And typically, that would mean I'd hit the snooze button about 13 different times because I was always running late to everything, and I was always just busy and rushing around. And it wasn't until a bomb at a marathon went off, blew up in my face, took my leg off, that I thought, man, I might be doing this wrong. And my priorities shifted after that. Every day I wake up, I'm thankful to be alive. I'm thankful no matter what happens that I get to count my blessings and not my problems. And my friend always says, there's not good in every day is not a good day, but there's good in every day. And I know you guys have heard that before, and it's so true. There's so many different times in our day that we can choose to have that victim mentality. It's not fair. Woe is me. Why is this happening to me? It's so hard. It's not going to make it easier because hard stuff happens. But when we look to the healer of all things, then that's when those harder things become more bearable. For me, it's hard every single day when I wake up and either reach for my wheelchair or reach for my prosthetic leg. But it's also a daily reminder of how short my life is and how I will never again take one more second of it for granted. When I got my prosthetic, I named her Felicia, because I said we needed to learn how to laugh at it, right? We needed to have fun with the things that we can't change. These are the things in my life and the cards that I have been dealt. And even though I am not in control of those cards, I'm in control how I play them. And so we choose to laugh about it and we choose to have fun. And so Felicia came about because I saw that quote and it said, I wish I had Felicia's life. She's always going somewhere. And so I wrapped her in a baby blanket and I did a birth announcement because she was a new member of our family. And I said, when I get Felicia, I'm going to go and I'm never going to stop. And so all of these things started just playing in my mind of what I was going to do on a fake leg that I didn't do on two real legs. Because now I look at life in a different way. I'm excited for the challenges. I'm excited for the obstacles. And so even though something is hard and something challenges me, I look for the opportunities in those challenges. And that may sound crazy because I'm getting ready to, like I said, have my 68th surgery in all of this. But I'm thinking up until my surgery, how many times I can get to the gym before that happens. The obstacle race that I just ran in the last couple of months, I'm thinking about how I can sign up for the next one. Because my life doesn't stop because something happens to me. My life keeps going because I'm so proud of everything that I've been able to do, and all of the glory is to God because He allows me to do it. Now, I think about all of the rooms that I've spoken and all the people that I've talked to over the past 5 years of doing this. And I say that if I can touch one person in a crowded room of people, then I'll have done what I came here to do, because I'm spreading my light. And we all have it. We all have our light. And so if I spread it to one other person, then they could spread it to another and another and another. And I'll have no idea what my one light has really done or the magnitude of it. But I want to know every single day when I lay my head down on my pillow at night that that's exactly what I've tried to do. It is so important to embrace the lives that God has given us. It is so important to say that you are enough. Just the way you are enough. Your unique talents and your abilities and even your struggles make you the most beautiful version of yourself possible. Now, that's not to say that we won't be rebellious at times. There have been many times in my life where I've tried to turn away from God. As a matter of fact, I got pregnant when I was 19 years old. That was hard. That was a very hard thing, and I was so far away from God when that happened. But each and every time He's accepted me back, and I've become a better person because of it. But I lay my life out, and I lay my heart out to say that it's not always going to be easy. These past 6 years have been the hardest of my entire life. In those couple of years, I have had to learn how to walk again. I have learned how to live again, and I have to constantly remind myself every single day that I have blessings that far outweigh the troubles of my life. But it's difficult, and life keeps happening, and I'm not naive to think that my life is going to be one big fairy tale from here. A couple years after the bombing, they had told me that I would never be able to have another child. And I had so many internal injuries from the bombing that was taken away from me. And that was hard because I've always wanted to give Noah a sibling. But a couple years after, I did have a baby, and I almost lost my life again. And my little girl came almost 3 months early, and we had to watch her on a ventilator fighting for her life for an entire month in the NICU because of all of the things that have happened as a result of that bombing. There are so many things that could have been taken away from me, that I guess were essentially taken away from me, but I will never look at it as that. Since the bombing, I ran in the Boston Marathon the last couple of miles because I had gotten up to 16 miles and then busted my leg. And I remember thinking that day that it wasn't about the number of miles, it was about crossing the finish line and showing that I'm not defeated. That same year, I testified in the trial of the remaining bomber. You talk about hard, that was hard. I sat 5 feet away from the biggest enemy of my life, someone that not only tried to kill me, but tried to kill my son and so many others. But I got to go back to court, and I got to make a statement in front of him. And I looked at him in the eyes, and he looked at me. And it was like I was staring at the devil because it was just like his soul. I could, when you look at someone, you can see their compassion, and you can see their personality and everything through their eyes. But in this man's eyes, you could see nothing but black. He was soulless. But what I said is I was asked to give a victim impact statement. But in order to do that, I would have to be someone's victim. And I'm not yours, and I'm not your brother's. And I went on to say that nobody's going to remember their names. What they're going to remember is what people go on to do afterwards, that the survivors have taken their lives back. Every day, I'm taking my life back. Every day that you go through the things that you go through and decide that you're going to still continue, you're taking your life back too. You're deciding to be a survivor and not a victim, and it's so important to do that. And then you get to the point where you can laugh about things, and you can name your fake leg Felicia, and you can also have very fun Halloweens where you dress up like Forrest Gump and Lieutenant Dan. That's my husband, and that's me as Lieutenant Dan. And my husband always asks where my leg is. They can't believe that I always lose it at home. But when you're in a wheelchair and then you have your leg in another room, then sometimes you lose it and you can't find it. And then my daughter is 2.5 now. So the best part of that story is that she takes it and hides it from me. And I find baby dolls. And oftentimes I find cereal in it because Felicia is hungry, apparently. And so these are the constant things that are going on in our lives. And I'm the best person to have around at Christmas time, right? This is life. I can't even make this stuff up. As a matter of fact, I was at the airport the other day, and I was running late for my flight because we had been delayed in the car going to the airport. And so I'm running through the airport as fast as I can, and I get to my gate, and I'm sitting down, and this man comes jogging, and he's out of breath, and he's like, and you know what he has in his hand? My left shoe. My shoe. Because I don't know if my shoe's fallen off. I can't feel it. But these things happen all the time. There are so many different occasions where I could just cry and think my life is miserable and think, man, this fake leg is the worst thing that could ever possibly happen to me. But I will never think like that because this leg, Felicia and I, even though I want to throw her across the room most days, even though that I typically don't want to put her on, I know that with her, I can do all of the things that I never did before. And it hurts and it's hard, but that's life. And one day, I believe with all of my heart, because I trust God with everything that I have, that I lay my life on the line every single day and I give him all the glory. It's so hard to rehash all of the memories, all of the events, everything that's happened in my life. But I do it because I hope that I can encourage and inspire other people to do it too. We will never be the solution for anyone. I cannot help anyone myself, but I can be part of the bridge that gets people to that solution. The only solution is Jesus. That's it. And it's the easiest yet most complicated solution ever. You know, in church this last Sunday, we were talking about things that were uncomfortable. Following Jesus is uncomfortable because it's hard. It's not an easy path to take. It's so much easier to go with what the world wants you to do, what the world considers popular and cool. But what Jesus wants for us, the purpose that he has for our lives, the plans that he has for us are so far out of this world that it's so hard to even comprehend. But with this, I have been given my purpose. With the worst parts of my life, I've been given my purpose. I've been able to go for 5 years and talk to people, but I've also created a foundation for kids that have experienced childhood trauma because my own child was associated with trauma. I've figured out that there's a huge gap and there's a huge need for treatment for people and children that are going through things that need mental health help. And so we have created our foundation on the basis of all the problems that have gone in our lives. I say that to tell you that whatever you're going through, don't give up. Lean into God, lean into Jesus because he's the one that's going to direct your path. He's going to be able to tell you the plans that he has for you are far greater than anything the world could ever give us. Every time that I turned away from God, I wound up alone usually broke, depressed, and exhausted. But every time that I turn towards God, no matter what I'm doing physically, no matter where I am emotionally, I am comforted. I have peace. I wish the same peace for each and every one of you. You all have such a power to make a difference. You're going to go and you're going to do amazing things with your life. And I want you to remember each morning that you wake up, there's a reason that you're here. There's a reason and there's a plan far bigger than you even know. You have the power to change someone just by the attitude you bring into the day. Count your blessings and never your problems, and learn to call on Jesus, and you will never, ever be forsaken, and nothing will be too big to handle. Thank you so much. God bless you guys.